Hi guys, James at RampantLionReviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to stick to Sweden and we're going to return to a brewery that has featured on the channel a good number of times before. I've had some really nice beers from these guys over the years, quite a few different styles, but I would say this brewery are best known for their New England Hazy IPAs. They're one of the most recognisable Swedish craft breweries these days, and if you are interested in those New England Hazy IPAs and you're interested in Swedish beer, then this is one that I would definitely recommend that you check out if you haven't already. But yeah, for this review then, we are going to head up towards Gothenburg once again, Göteborg as you would say in Swedish, the Swedish craft beer capital up there on the west coast. Got to get that Gothenburg catchphrase in when we're reviewing the Gothenburg beers because it is just channel tradition these days. And for this review, we are going to return to Stigbergets Bryggeri once again. So this beer is called the YZAH, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. It comes in at 5.9% ABV and it's another New England Hazy IPA. So this beer was released as part of the Lokal Osmoskalig assortment through Systembolaget here in Sweden for August of 2021, and there was another IPA released this month which was also called Ipa something, and I forget the exact name of it now, but they released a sour beer as well actually. But I thought I would have a go at the two IPAs, although I do need to have a try at some of the Stigbergets sours at some point fairly soon. But yeah, I was quite surprised when I got this one and it came in a little 330ml can, because obviously most of the Stigbergets stuff tends to come in the 440s. But yeah, curious to see how it turns out. A 5.9% New England Hazy IPA, this one. So let's see how we get on then. Looking forward to this. So, as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Stigbergets Bryggeri before, and you will no doubt see more added to that list in the near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel of course has a geography based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you happen to be interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Swedish beers that I've reviewed for you. That's constantly being added to, and as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, on to my brewery notes then to tell you once again about Stigbergets Bryggeri. So Stigbergets Bryggeri, as I've mentioned to you already, are based in Gothenburg, Göteborg, up on the Swedish west coast, and the company was founded by Nils Hultkrantz and Richard Simonsson. So these guys own two bars that share the one kitchen. This is the Bar Kino and the Hagabions Cafe, which can be found on Linagatan in the city, and they both opened back in 2007. The building in which they're located is an independent cinema, and I didn't realise this until I actually went to visit it. And if you're interested in seeing that video, you can find it in the Out and Abouts playlist in the channel homepage, and it is quite nice actually. I do hope that I can go there again and spend a little bit of time in the Hagabions Cafe. Some really interesting films there, so next time I'll have a watch of a film, I'll have a couple of beers and we'll do it that way. But when these guys got started, originally the idea was that they wanted to brew a few beers that they could sell in the bars, but this led to them kegging the beer and selling it to other pubs, and eventually to bottling the beers, which began in November of 2014. And if you watch my very early Stigbergets reviews from back in about 2015, 2016, you will see the Stigbergets beers in bottles, which is quite strange to think about now. But the original beers that these guys were producing were mainly English and German styles, but of course they really started to make their name when they changed to brewing the more hoppy American styles of beer. But the original head brewer was Olle Andersson, who is one of the co-owners at OO Brewing, and he was at the company until about April of 2017, at which point he was replaced by Barnaby Struve, who was one of the vice presidents at Three Floyds in Munster in Indiana, close to Chicago in America. But Olle Andersson was the one who really put the New England Hazy IPA on the map in Sweden. He was the creator of the GBG Beer Week beer of 2016, which was released under Stigbergets, also the Amazing Haze, and then under his own OO brewing brand he created the Narangi, and those are three of what I would consider the four cult classic Swedish New England IPAs. The other one of course being the New Sweden IPA from Opigårds. But yeah, over the years, these guys have continued to expand. They moved to a brewery at Party Halarna, where they were brewing 5,000 litre batches at a time, and they also started working on some sour beers there as well. That move came around in 2017, and they started selling their beers in 440 millilitre cans at this point, and this has allowed them to export a lot more and build their kind of international portfolio and standing. But they now have a brew team of Ollie Banks, who used to work for Beavertown in London and England, and also Lucas Munraid, who used to work for All In Brewing, which is one of the numerous Gothenburg-based gypsy brewers. But as of summer 2020, they've just moved to a new brewery in Ringen in the city, and they're considering brewing some lambic beer there as well. So it's going to be interesting to see whether that materialises. But at their current brewery, they've got the possibility for a bar and swimming facilities, but that's been kind of slowed down because of the whole COVID-19 sort of thing. But yeah, again, this will be interesting to see how that develops over the next while. In April of 2020, they opened up a bar in Stockholm, and they've also opened their own Folköl shop in Gothenburg as well. And for those of you who don't know, Folköl in Sweden, anything that is 3.5% and below can be sold privately and through supermarkets and things like this. And if it's beer, you call it Folköl, people's beer. But anything above 3.5% has to be sold in the Systembolaget, the state-owned alcohol monopoly. But as I say, these guys are a very, very well-known brewery these days. They do lots of different styles. As of August 2021, when I'm filming this particular review for you, they've produced 140 different kinds of beer, according to Untappd. But yeah, that is all I can really tell you about these guys for the moment. If you want to learn more about the brewery, you can check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on. And you can, of course, check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that they've done. And if you want to try new things from them, then I recommend you check out the Local Osmoska-ligged releases, which happen on, close to the first of every month. And Stigbergets usually release 2, 3, sometimes even more beers every month. So yeah, you'll always get a couple of IPAs, sometimes a sour and sometimes something just completely different. In recent times they've been doing a few lagers and things like that as well, and you'll get barley wines and imperial stouts and stuff like that every so often. But a very, very solid brewery, and if you're interested in Swedish craft beer, Stigbergets should be one of the first breweries that you check out. But yeah, as I say, that is everything for the history section. Check out those links in the description below, but we're going to get on and have a taste of this beer now. So just to let you have a little look at the artwork of this one before we open it up. As you can see, it kind of sticks to their sort of nautical sea bird theme that they've had over the years. There you can see on the top of the can, there is Stigbergets in that nice sort of handwritten style. There is the YZAH, if I'm calling it this one. So this is the YZAH, 5.9%. Hazy New England IPA. You can see this is one of these shiny cans that the camera hates. These are always a pain in the backside to film with, just because they reflect so much. I wish that they would put like a satin finish over them, but I suppose the kind of water condensation helps it a little bit. But like I said, this one's a bit unusual because it's a 330 milliliter can, and it's only really the Amazing Haze that you'll see often in the 330s as far as I can remember, and some of the sour beers too. But yeah, I don't know if this has been brewed in a smaller batch or anything, but what I can tell you is it's a 5.9% IPA. This one is brewed with Hallertau Blanc from Germany, which is a lovely hop, 11% alpha acid. It's quite like Nelson Sauvin, but it has a bit more of that German noble quality to it actually. And I think that's the first time I've had that hop, at least as far as I know, from Stigbergets. So yeah, this I think could be quite interesting. A 5.9% New England IPA with German Hallertau Blanc. I believe I paid about 35 Swedish kroner. About 35 Swedish kroner for this beer, which is €3.50, about £3 sterling, and I guess somewhere in the region of like $4 American for those of you watching over there. But yeah, let's get this guy out and we'll get on with the tasting then. I'm very curious to see what this has in store for us. Just quite strange to drink a 330 milliliter from Stigbergets rather than a 440, but you will see me review the other IPA that they released this month in a couple of videos time, so keep your eye out for that. But I wondered, when I saw the name of this, I thought this, could this be like Maori or something like that, and maybe it's New Zealand hops. But no, I don't know why they've called these beers the names that they have. I'm just trying to line this up. But yeah, I think that's okay. My OCD always makes me want to be like, yeah, get this lined up on the camera. Don't really have OCD, but I just kind of say that. But anyway, yeah, this one looks pretty nice actually. So as you could see when the beer poured, it had about 1/4 to a 1/3 finger of a frothy, I would say perfect white head. That faded away to just be a very kind of thin foamy layer, yeah, it's got a nice kind of ring around the edge of the glass now, a little bit of a kind of foamy island in the middle, but overall, I mean, it looks pretty nice. In terms of the colour of this beer, I would say that this one is a little bit of a kind of rich mango juice colour. It's actually a very kind of bright yellow, although it does have a wee bit of kind of darkness to it as well. But I always like comparing the New England IPAs to different fruit juices because that's just what their appearance reminds me of. But yeah, remember the colour of your beer depends on 1, the type of malts that you use, that determines the magnitude of the colour of your beer. 2, the length of your wort boil. The longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour of beer. Any adjuncts that you put in the beer and any barrel aging that you do will of course play a role as well, but you only really have to care about those variables when it comes to sour beers and things like that, not when we're talking about New England IPAs. But for a 5.9%er, one thing I will say about this beer is that the level of haze on this is pretty damn impressive actually. So the level of haze depends on the type of yeast that you use. It also depends on the wheat and oat content of the beer as well. So yeah, that is another thing that you have to bear in mind with this. But for a 5.9%er, I think this is one of the hazier ones that I've come across, and you can see if I stick my fingers behind the glass there, it does look, it is pretty damn impressive actually. So yeah, 1 or 2 big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass, a few little ones going up towards the bottom of the head there, but overall it does look pretty damn nice, I have to say. I think this one, for a New England IPA, there's nothing particularly surprising about the appearance. So I think we should perhaps move on and take a look at the aroma of this one then. Certainly looks like a very, very nice beer. But aroma time for this one, let's go for it. Yeah, that smells pretty nice, I'm going to say. Yeah, so first impression of this is that it's a very soft, kind of juicy, but slightly oily fruity New England IPA. There's a lovely smoothness to this one. So as I've told you in previous reviews, in my opinion at least, there's 6 different directions that you can take a New England IPA. They can be a little bit more kind of farmhousey, they can be and sort of yeasty. They can be a little bit more rye leaning and grainy, wheaty and bitey, oaty and creamy, barley malt leaning and bready, or they can be a little bit more brown sugary and sweet. But quite often you'll find that a number of these characteristics combine, and that is what gives you your overall picture of any given New England IPA. But the first impression of this one is that there's quite a bit of barley malt. It's got quite a bready character to it. At the same time, it's got a lovely smoothness to it, and there's just a wee touch of an oily, fruity character to this one. But you know, if you have had Hallertau Blanc before, you will realise that it's a very distinctive hop actually. You know, as I say, it's like Nelson Sauvin with those white, green, grapey, gooseberry type aromas and flavours, but you just get that German noble character out of it, and that's exactly what you get with this beer. The first impression of this is that it's got a lovely smoothness to it, and it's just really light and kind of juicy actually. So the aroma of this one is quite interesting because this is very different from what I've had before from any of the this is very different from what I've had from a good number of the different IPAs that I've had from Stigbergets. Of course, a bit of a brain fart there, but yeah, let's try and just break down the aroma of this one for you a little bit more succinctly before we taste the beer. But yeah, backbone of this one, you can certainly smell a lovely big kind of smooth white bready character to this one, and it almost smells a little bit like, I've spoken about this before, where you get that fresh white bread but you've got a little bit of flour on the bread crust. You can really smell a little bit of that in this beer, so I really like how that kind of pieces together in this one. So on that note, it does get a big thumbs up from me. The kind of dusty bread crusty character that this beer has, I think, is very, very nice. But yeah, soft white bread, and it's quite a fluffy white bread there as well. You can smell some of the wheat sort of thickening that out, but you also get a lovely kind of oaty, creamy character out of this one too, which I can certainly appreciate. So yeah, yeah, the oaty creaminess, I think the more that you smell this one, you can smell that sort of slightly dry but still smooth and almost slightly sweet note from the oats coming out of this beer. So yeah, white bready base, a little bit of that floury kind of thing in there, as I say, from, you know, it being fresh white bread, a little touch of bread crust. You can feel the wheat just smoothing it out. At the back of the nose, you do get a little touch of a bitiness from the wheat, but then you can feel the really smooth, oaty, creamy elements for the really smooth, oaty, creamy notes out of this one. And on top of that, you get a little bit of a kind of Werther's Original kind of butter candy sort of thing. You do get a little touch of sweetness out of this one, but I would say overall, if I had to pick where this beer kind of leans, it's like it's got a sort of bready barley malt backbone to it, but then a more oaty, creamy, you know, a more oaty, creamy top to it, if that makes sense. I think it's these two components are the most prominent in my mind. But yeah, as I say, smooth white bready notes, a bit of bread crust. Then you've also got that big, as we say, oaty, that big oaty, creamy note out of it. So I really like how this beer goes together in that sense. So it gets a big thumbs up from me from that perspective. The malty backbone of this one is really nice, and I think this might be a very smooth, oaty, creamy IPA actually. And I do like this with, you will find that with Stigbergets they do vary things up a little bit. We've had more rye leaning IPAs from them in recent times. We've had more wheaty and bitey ones. These guys do vary up their malt bases to give you something different every month, which is great. But yeah, I think we should move on to the hoppy side of the aroma with this beer now. So, as I said, I'm a big fan of Hallertau Blanc. And it's always really interesting because the thing with this beer is you get that smoothness and brightness that you expect of German noble hops. I mean, the two slightly higher alpha acid German hops that I can think of, and I think there is another one that's come out recently as well, but it's always Mandarina Bavaria, which is about 8% alpha acid, lovely big orangey notes there, but then Hallertau Blanc, which is 11%, and as I say, gives you more of a kind of gooseberry, green, white, grapey sort of thing, but you always get that German noble character on the green component with this. So this beer has a lovely little bit of smooth earthiness to it. You get a nice kind of quite bright floral aromaticity, and also a bit of a kind of brighter grassy component to it as well. So the green side of this beer, I think, is very nice. So lovely bright floral aromaticity to it, and a kind of lighter grassy zesty kind of thing. So I really like how this beer goes about its business in that sense. Yeah, green component, I think other than that there's not too much to say. Quite German and quite noble, but on the fruity side of things as well, it is pretty straight shooting. I mean, you get a bit of white, green, grapey character out of it. You get a more kind of gooseberry, oily type thing, and yeah, I mean, it goes together really quite nice. So there's maybe a wee touch of a limey note mixing in with the kind of grassy elements to it, but I think this beer really is quite straight shooting in what it does. It's got, as I say, gooseberries, it's got white, green grapes. I really like that about this one. So on that note, it gets a big thumbs up from me. So yeah, I like what this beer shows us on the aroma. So I think it's about time that we have a taste of this one. Always take a bit of time to ponder over the aroma of your beer before you get stuck into it, but I think we're going to try this one now. So yeah, this one is the YZAH, if I'm pronouncing the name correctly, probably not, from Stigbergets Bryggeri in Ringen in Gothenburg, up on the Swedish west coast. 5.9% New England hazy, whatever you want to call it, IPA. Hallertau Blanc from Germany. I think this is going to be very nice. Slange, skål, cheers. Oh yeah, very easy drinking New England IPA. In fact, very, very light and just easy going. It's almost a little bit more like a kind of New England pale ale in a lot of ways. And the thing is, yeah, now that is interesting. I do like how this beer goes about its I do like what this beer's doing, but as I say, first impression is I think if I was to taste this blind without knowing what it was, I don't know, I might think this one was a pale ale. The first impression of this beer is that it has a really quite wet mouthfeel to it, and it's just really light and drinkable. So that's definitely sticking in my mind with this one. But I'm going to say, in terms of quality, what you'll get from Stigbergets, it doesn't deviate from the usual quality that you'll get from these guys at all. But yeah, it strikes me as quite a wet, easygoing and drinkable New England IPA. So yeah, this is interesting for sure, this one. Not 100% sure what to make of this beer actually, but yeah, interesting stuff. But yeah, let's try and break this down for you then and describe what's going on a bit more succinctly. So straight away, across the middle third of your palate and the back third of your palate, you can feel like a solid white bready base there. It's not quite as airy as I thought it was going to be. Like, it's actually quite a thick, hefty white bready base that you get in this one. So I really like how that goes together. So a lovely kind of thicker white bready note in this beer. That is the backbone of this. But if you go, and that's on the middle third and the back third of your palate, it's a bit more grainy towards the back of your palate, but you can also feel like a sort of wheaty layer sitting on top of this, both on the middle third and back third of your palate, just thickening it out actually. So the kind of barley malt and the wheat are quite, you know, kind of close knit on this beer, just thickening it out. But if we focus on the middle third of your palate now, if you go to either end of that middle third of your palate, you can feel there's a little bit of a kind of bread crusty note to it, which I really do quite like. So you can feel a little bit of a kind of bread crusty note at either end of that middle third of your palate. And then on top of that kind of slightly thicker wheaty layer, you can feel a bit of the oaty creaminess. So if you go right down the middle line of your palate, you can feel that's where the oats are most kind of concentrated. And then as you move out towards the sides of your palate, you can feel there's a little bit more of a there is a little bit more of a kind of smoother, almost slightly sweet oaty character coming out of this beer. So you can just feel that spreading towards the side of the palate. So yeah. But yeah, the oatiness is actually, it does develop a wee bit of dryness, I think, this one, in terms of oatiness. And the other thing I'll say about this beer is I was picking up a little bit of that Werther's Original butter candy sort of thing in the flavour, but it's quite minimal. I mean, in the very middle of your palate, you get like quite a small circle right there. You get a kind of small circle there, and you get a little bit of that, and that obviously will be the kind of boozy side of the beer coming out. But really, this beer, it strikes me as a little bit more of a kind of old school, sort of 2015 Swedish New England IPA. Like if you think of the Narangi, the Amazing Haze and stuff like this, the malt base in this one is a little bit more like that. Now I did read as well that somewhere that this beer is an organic, uses organic malt and things like that, and in fairness you can get, I do wonder if some of the thickness that you get out of this beer in a sense is due to the types of malt that they're using, but there's nothing on this, like it doesn't seem to have the EU organic symbol and things on it. Now I don't know if you're legally obliged to show that if the beer is, but some breweries use it as a marketing thing of course. But the malty side of this beer is just a wee bit thicker, and you almost get a very slightly chalky kind of feeling out of this, and that is something I've noticed that you get with more organic grains. But yeah, this beer is a very kind of bready, wheaty, oaty kind of thing. Like it's a sort of more old school New England IPA, and I've noticed in recent times that the New England IPAs are getting a bit sweeter in a sense. I've commented on this in videos before, but yeah, it's quite a straight shooting beer in terms of its malt base. You only get a little tiny circle in the very dead centre of your palate, which has a wee bit of that Werther's Original kind of brown sugary boozy sweetness to it. So yeah, it's interesting for sure in how that goes together. But let's focus, I think that covers the middle third of your palate with this one. Let's focus on the back third of your palate briefly then. So border region between middle third and back third of your palate, again there's a wee bit of a bready build up there, a little bit of a bread crusty note, then into the base of that back third of your palate, again you've got that sort of barley malt white bready base, a bit of a thicker wheaty note on top, and then you've got the kind of oaty, the bigger oaty notes in there too, which I think go together very nicely. So yeah, the kind of the fruity component of this beer I think kind of suits all of this too. But as I say, you've got that thicker white bready note there. You do get one or two little more grainy bread crusty elements towards the back palate, but then sitting on top of the sitting on top of all of that kind of thick wheaty layer, if you like, you can feel that more airy, bready, yeasty note out of this one, which I do very much like. So the flavour of this beer on the back of the palate, you can feel it's a little bit taller. So when you start on the very back of your palate, you can feel the flavour's a bit taller, and it condenses down as you go further forward. But then into the middle third of your palate, you can feel that flavour is a little bit more dense and just a little bit more kind of squashed together. And I think that sort of suits this one in a sense. So yeah, more airy, bready, yeasty notes sitting on top of the kind of wheaty and oaty layer on that back third of the palate, but otherwise it's quite similar, other than a bit more kind of grainy, if you like. But yeah, the as I say, this beer, malty and yeasty wise, it strikes me as a bit more of an old school kind of 2015 era Swedish New England IPA. So yeah, I do suspect the organic thing might be true in this, just because of that slightly chalky kind of thing that you've got going on with the malts. So that's interesting too. But let's focus on the hoppy side of the beer then. So back corners of the palate, you do get a little bit of earthiness out of this one, and it's quite a smooth earthiness. This is typical for German noble hops, I find, but as you move further forward it becomes a little bit herbal, and as you reach the front kind of corners of the palate you get a more floral aromatic note out of this one, and it is quite bright actually. Round the front curve of the palate there's again a nice bright grassy note to this one. It's got a wee bit of zesty character to it, which I do quite like, and as I've repeated in numerous reviews, I often talk about this in lager beer reviews, you know, these higher alpha acid German hops, the Mandarina, the Hallertau Blanc, and I forget the other new one that's come out fairly recently, but you always get that typical German noble greenness to them, you know, the bright floralness, the bright grassiness, and the smooth earthiness. You always get that, whereas the Czech noble hops tend to be a bit more kind of spicy. The Slovenian ones are very, very smooth. So I do love that with the German hops, and I hope we see more and more higher alpha acid hops coming out of Germany, of course. But yeah, Hallertau Blanc is really interesting in that sense, because you just get a very bright German noble quality to this one. But let's focus on the fruity part of the beer then, the front third of your palate. So border region between front third and middle third, again there's a wee bit of a bready build up there, bit of a bread crust, and then the base of that front third of your palate, it's kind of smooth. You know, it's that smooth white bread and a little touch of an oaty kind of character there. I think it is more oaty rather than anything else. And on top of that, you've got that nice oily bubble where those juicy fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. So yeah. But yeah, it goes together very nicely from that perspective. But it's quite, you know, I would say this beer, fruity wise, it is quite straight shooting. I do wonder if there is another hop in this along with the Hallertau Blanc, but I wouldn't be surprised if this is just a single hop beer, come to think of it. I do get towards the back of the palate there, I wouldn't be surprised if there would be a little bit of Simcoe or something in this, you know, something like that. It feels like there might be a wee bit of a Simcoe base there, because on the back of that front third of your palate you've got a very soft, you get a wee bit of a pungent passion fruit, then a little bit of a softer kind of passion fruit there, and maybe a bit of apricot as well. So there's a very soft tropical note on the back half of that front third of your palate, but as you move into the front half of that front third of your tongue, it's definitely all about, you know, the white, green, grapey notes, a little bit of the kind of more oily gooseberry kind of character. There's a lot of that going on with this beer, so interesting from that perspective, definitely. But yeah, the fruity character in this one is really nice, and Hallertau Blanc, as I say, it's a lovely hop, but I do, as I say, just get a little bit of tropical character off this one, although in fairness, you know, the further that we go into the aftertaste with it, it does feel a little bit more like it could be a kind of sultana, you know, dried white, green, grapey quality. So I might be mistaking that, you know, sort of apricot-y, tropical-y kind of thing for a dried sultana type flavour. So this beer gives you a few things to think about. That's a given with this one. But, you know, Hallertau Blanc, as I say, it's a lovely, lovely hop, just a slightly more oily and gooseberry leaning version of Nelson Sauvin. If you like Nelson Sauvin, you will enjoy Hallertau Blanc. I've no doubt about that. So yeah, this is really interesting for sure. One of my favourite blends that I had ever, actually, I think it might have been Hallertau Blanc and Enigma Enigma's an Australian hop, which has a lot of the qualities of Nelson Sauvin from New Zealand, but a bit of a red fruity character to it. So if you combine these two together, it does some really interesting things. But yeah, this is a lovely, very smooth, and just like sort of gooseberry, white, green, grapey, sultana leaning New England IPA, this one. And as I say, the malty side of this one is a bit more kind of chalky and thick. Anyway, I think the more you drink of this beer, the more kind of thickness you get out of it. So yeah, this is very nice. I've enjoyed this one, but it still gives you, I think we should move on to the mouthfeel now, incidentally. So yeah, round off the tasting section with the mouthfeel. When we talk about this beer, I would say that it really feels a little bit more like a pale ale in a sense, but it thickens up the more that you drink of it. So overall, I would say this beer is towards the top end of mid-bodied. For a 5.9%er, I feel this one has a good bit of thickness to the malt base, which is quite impressive. So it's a very smooth malt base, like I say, not really a kind of sweetness to it, and it has a wee bit of a kind of chalky dryness, which is interesting. But yeah, very smooth, slightly chalky, dry malt base, as we say. A little bit of wheaty bitiness in there, but the hoppy character, I think, is very, very nice as well. But you've also got a little bit of that kind of, you've got a nice oily, juicy, fruity character coming out of this beer, which I think is really nice as well. But yeah, it's just interesting to see how this one, how it goes about its business in that sense. You know, the big fruity, juicy character in this beer is quite oily, and it just rounds off the beer really nice. So yeah, as I say, oily, kind of gooseberry, juicy, fruity notes out of this one. The malt base is very, very smooth, not too sweet at all. And in terms of IBUs, which we haven't mentioned, I think this one is a fairly standard, 25, maybe 30 at a push IBUs. So yeah, it's interesting. It gives you a little bit, it's almost a bit like a kind of pale ale in a sense, but yeah, it has the mouthfeel of a pale ale, but the kind of flavour properties of an IPA, and it's got a little bit more of the kind of zip to it, I guess we could say, of one of these kind of lower ABV IPAs that we've had in recent times. So I like this one, I certainly do. I'm curious to see what the slightly higher alcohol one is, because the other one in this Ipa release that they've done is a double IPA, and it's supposed to be a hybrid between West Coast and New England actually. So I look forward to reviewing that one in a couple of videos time. But I think we can leave it at that for this. So this one was the Ipa YZAH, a lovely, quite smooth and almost old school New England IPA. The Hallertau Blanc is really nice in this one, and just soft, slightly dried gooseberry, white, green, grapey kind of things out of it. So yeah, interesting beer this one, and I'm glad we got the chance to review it. So yeah, let's leave it there. Once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Stigbergets, and we will no doubt return to these guys at some point in the near future. But thank you again for watching my reviews. Please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Check out my social media, check out their social media, and I'll see you guys again. This one was the Ipa YZAH, a 5.9% New England hazy, whatever you want to call it, IPA from Stigbergets Bryggeri in Gothenburg, Göteborg, up on the Swedish west coast. Slange, skål, cheers, and see you guys in the next review.